Hi, welcome to the Splendid Sampler 2. So along with me, Jenni Smith, it's actually my block this week at last, which is very exciting, and this represents a sailor collar, and the reason behind that is that as designers for the book, we were asked to think about our quilting happy, and at the time when I got the email through, I was working on a quilt which is an ongoing project that uses parts of the sailor collar. I've got some here that belonged to my grandpa Stanley, so I'm using remnants of that which has been saved and passed on to me with some other fabrics. This is a dress that him and my nan bought me from a holiday when I was young with little embroidered figures on. So for me it's kind of thinking about him as I'm sewing along. He was a big creative influence in my life. I lived with my parents and my grandparents growing up, and he was always creating things, painting the ceilings, building kitchens, designing boats, building a caravan that floated on water. He was just one of those people who was a huge creative influence in my life. So my block is most definitely dedicated to him and all the influence on me. It takes a little bit of cutting out, but otherwise it's quite simple. It's traditionally pieced together, and I'm really excited to share it with you. So here goes with the cutting. So this is the cream print, and starting out with a 9-inch square, you can see how you get all your shapes. I'm sorry, there's quite a lot of cutting in this block, but there was no way around it. So it's just taken me about 10 minutes basically just to measure and cut out of these. This is what's left over then in the cream print from that 9-inch square, so hopefully they will be useful on some of your other blocks. And then I've done the same as well here with my navy or blue print. I've gone a little bit brighter on this sample here. So again, there's the rectangles and some smaller squares and your I and J. There's also a reasonable amount of the blue fabric left, so it might be that you want to, rather than cut in the big square first, if you've got smaller scraps of fabric, just to cut exactly what you need for this block. The cutting instructions for the red fabric, actually 4 inches by 3 inches is enough to get your K and your 2 rectangles and your L square, because that's what I've got left over there. So obviously when we're writing the instructions, we try and be a little bit generous in case any cutting instructions go wrong, but 4 inches by 3 inches is enough, and then we're ready to work on the template. When it comes to the assembly step 1, with the triangle template here, it says to make it in template plastic, but you can actually just use the paper as well, because all you're doing is you're getting your 2 rectangles. So on the navy it's the G rectangles, and you're putting them both together. So I've got the wrong sides there or the right sides, it doesn't matter as long as you've got them both together, and then you can simply put this template on top and cut the excess away, because with half rectangle triangles they're different to half square triangles, so you can't use both rectangles of separate colours stitched down the middle and cut them open, because you don't end up with the correct shape. So actually this extra parts here we don't need, we can't use those, so they're spare. And what you want to have when you take this template away are triangles that have the opposite orientation, which you can see are going to be used to shape the collar. So we're doing the same with this template on the A rectangles as well in the lighter colour. So once you've got your rectangular units and you're sewing them together, what I find is easier, if on the cream coloured, then you actually mark your 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then you can ensure that where the 1/4 inch point is there, that it's meeting the corner of the darker triangle underneath, and the same at this end, and then you can machine that and press it towards the dark fabric. So I've done my 1/4 inch seam, I've pressed it really well towards the darker fabric, and then these units shall measure 3.5 inches long by 2 3/4 inches wide, so there isn't any excess to trim away really. It's just making sure they're pressed really nicely and flat, and then you have these units, they mirror image each other, as you can see, and they are then stitched into rectangle B there in the cream. For step 3 of assembly, then we've got our 2 cream F squares, and just across one direction here you're going to draw on your center line, and then what you're going to do is you're going to place one of these on top, so right sides together, of the J square in the navy or the blue, and the same with the L in the red or the pink fabric that I'm using there. And once they're right sides together and all the edges match up with the 1/4 inch seam guide, we're sewing a 1/4 inch either side of that center line that we've just made to make some small half square triangle units. So I have machined 1/4 inch either side of my line there, and then what you do is you cut with your rotary cutter along the center line, and you press the units towards the dark side like I've done here, and then you just trim away the little dog ears. So you'll end up with 4 units, 2 that are blue and cream and 2 that are red or pink and cream, and they now measure 1 1/4 inches. So I'm sorry they're small, but it's just what we need for the design. Step 4 is a little bit like a jigsaw puzzle, where we're starting to make these sections by piecing them all together. So you've got a cream, a blue and a cream, and then you've got your half square triangle pointing upwards next to this rectangle, so that becomes continuous there, and then a different half square triangle. So it's really important just to follow the diagram to make one of these, and the second unit you're doing this again in the mirror image. So it's making sure that the orientation, that you're not repeating this layout here, but that the orientation is the opposite way. It's important as well, just because these units are so small, so that they don't get too bulky, that you follow how to press the seams. So on this one I've pressed the seams outwards this way, and here I've pressed this seam down, and again I've gone outwards here, so now they will join to make a block. You can see that these units here have been joined, and I have pressed the seams inwards towards this B rectangle here, and then the middle section of the sailor collar here are your C rectangles that join together to I, and then we're getting there. So the knots in the sailor collar, the tie units here, are stitched into the E rectangle, and then you've got your central panel here and the top that all then come together. And I'd say the main challenge is just really pressing it really nice and flat, because obviously you've got a small number of units that make up these bottom corners of the block, and these are much bigger pieces, so it just has to keep nice and flat, and then it can be stitched in with all your other beautiful blocks. So this is the block all finished and stitched together and pressed. I did just leave it overnight with a heavy book on top of it to get it to that 6.5 inches, and it's going to be really nice to see how it works with the other Liberty print fabrics I've been using, and nice to see my quilt growing. So thanks for joining me, and I hope it was useful.